I watched Game of Thrones, the full show, in 10 days. I watched the entire TV show in 10 days. Is that a little obsessive? Yeah, it might be. Did I watch anything else pretty much besides the show in that time period? No, I did not. The show was absolutely amazing, and I understand why some consider it to be the best TV show ever. It definitely hooked me. I do have a slight addictive personality when it comes to certain things, and I basically, part of the reason why I was able to finish it as quickly as I did was I would probably be in bed from 10 o'clock to 1 o'clock every night on my phone watching it on HBO, and just sitting there and just binging it and watching as much as I can, basically until 1 a.m. the past like week and a half. The show was very interesting. Yes, the end of the show, the finale, like the last couple episodes came out the month I graduated. So the show had ended 4 years ago. It started in 2011. And of course I knew of Game of Thrones. I'd known about it. I knew that it was a big TV show. It was probably one of the biggest TV shows in the world of the last decade. I don't know the details of the books themselves, but I think this is probably one of the best adaptations from a book to TV or movies or whatever you want to call it, to digital media. I would say that just in the sense of the amount of time in the show. Like I said, the whole show series was maybe roughly 80 hours of footage. And when it comes to, and that was maybe in, I don't know, 6 books. I don't know. I think it was like 6 to 8. I don't totally know. It was somewhere in there. 6 to 8 books, roughly. I think just because the show had so much time to, I feel like, do more with the time they have. Because, I mean, when you think about it, movies, even long ones, and movies especially in the 2000s, it seemed like a lot more in the 90s were like maybe an hour and a half. 2 hours was a long movie at the time. Now it's like you can't consider it to be a long movie unless it's like over 2 hours and 45 minutes, because movie lengths have just gone up. And it's like some of these episodes were an hour and a half, and every show was about an hour. So it's like it has so much time to really develop and grow characters and plot points and details that a normal TV show, I feel like, has an average run time of 45 minutes, if not 30. And an average movie, let's say, is 2 hours long. It's almost half the length of a movie, if not almost 3/4 of the length of a movie. So you're able to do a lot more. And so basically by the end of the one season, you have basically, if I do rough math, almost 20 movie lengths of time that you don't have to develop other stuff when it comes to certain adaptations. And something else that I found that was very unique to Game of Thrones is how the show itself was structured, in the sense of, I guess, like the like the plot. Like there's never, I don't think, been a show as in depth in the sense of what's included in the plot. At the beginning, it's practically 1 or 2 storylines, but at one point it's like it is like a book, because I think I actually saw something where at one point the book follows 13 characters at once. It is the most like certain books I've read than any other movie, because it follows everybody's story and perspectives, but trying to basically keep it in line with the story and people. And books can be like that, especially fantasy novels, where it will be like one chapter is a chapter from this character. So you're seeing everything in this specific character's point of view, which in this show, it would go from different segments. It's like it's a 50-minute episode to an hour episode, depending. You cut it up and you might have 5-minute segments from different characters as the plot moves along for each and every one of them. And maybe it comes back to a certain character again or whatever, and it kind of bounces around just like a book would do. And I believe part of the reason is trying to base it off the book And I also think part of the reason is there's so many characters. That's just the best way to necessarily do it and structure it. Where it is cool because like if you go to Big Bang Theory, there's like 6 characters total, and you might hop from one, and it's not even one person's perspective. It's, I mean, obviously it's a sitcom, so it's different, but you're basically maybe bouncing between 2 groups, and that's it, max. Or most of the time, it's basically one group that you follow for the most part. So it is really different. And then not only that, like everybody said, and I knew beforehand, the show is not afraid to kill off characters, and it's not even the show; it is the books as well. But this show is brutal when it comes to people's deaths. Very similar to, I feel like, old timey England when it was just an all out war. It's just ridiculous the amount of character growth and development and stuff you have. Like, I think part of it, like I said, is because of the length of the show. You're just able to flesh out characteristics from each person and really see how they change and adapt and how they grow as a person. And I feel like they did that the best compared to most TV shows. Like it was really, really good because in it you both saw the characters and the actors themselves grow alongside the show, and it was very, very impressive what they were able to do. And I also, I guess we'll just go ahead and say this now, that I do understand why when the finale of the show came out, there was like so much of a outrage for how it ended. I wasn't necessarily upset with how it ended. I've never read the books, and I know that the last book isn't out yet, so basically some of the stuff that happens in the show might not actually happen in the book. And so that is interesting to say the least, because you would have thought that you would not have the writers of a TV show end the story in their own way. But it is very interesting because I see why people hated it. I was talking to someone today, and they kind of told me and how they looked at it with how they felt like the last season was very rushed in particular. Maybe not necessarily the 7th, to me didn't seem super rushed, maybe partially, but nothing too crazy. And that which I can kind of see that because I feel like the beginning of it was very slow building, and then it just so slowly sped up and got more chaotic and more hectic, and the stuff that was happening in the show just got crazier and crazier. And it was just very, very interesting. Like, I wasn't expecting the characters to end up where they did. I knew certain parts of the show, like, beforehand. I mean, it's a show that started over 10 years ago, so it's like there's a lot that I've missed. Like, I knew before I even watched the show, I knew Ned Stark died early. I knew that Jon Snow killed Khaleesi. I knew that Arya killed the Night King. I knew that Khaleesi was Jon's aunt and that they got together. I knew I knew the character of Joffrey and Tyrion, and how one was the uncle and one's a shitty nephew and just a bitch that ends up being king. There was, and I knew that he died. So there was very big plot points that I knew happened. I just didn't know necessarily when. I didn't necessarily know why or how all of this wrapped in together. So I was still going into it pretty much on a whim to what would happen. I guess the finale I kind of knew, but didn't fully know. Like, I knew she died, but I didn't know why he killed her and killed Khaleesi. So it was still kind of a surprise. Not necessarily her death. Like, I saw the reasoning behind it as I was going into it, but I see why people were upset. And one of the reasons was, I don't know, it felt like Khaleesi's character in particular, it changed so much to the end of the show, how she burns down King's Landing with her dragon. And it didn't seem like it was necessarily her, because they did represent her as such a good person. And they also built it up for Jon to basically be the savior for Westeros. And because he's half Northern, half Targaryen, and that he's the one for the throne, and how he'll be the person to unite the continent or whatever. And so that was interesting, because it just nothing ended up necessarily happening with it. He ended up being sent to the Night's Watch and went north of the Wall, because he killed the queen. So it was just kind of like, well, what was the point of that big buildup? And then not only that, with Khaleesi is like, I guess in bits and pieces you kind of saw the build up and character development of like, but maybe she is a little evil or crazy in some way, and it kind of became more obvious obviously as the show ended, because they kind of were like, well, if you look at this kind of makes sense a little bit, in the sense of like her having a basically positive feedback loop to killing evil people at no cost practically, and being rewarded for it and stuff like that. And it was just, it was very weird. And she also became like, she basically ended her father's last wishes. She did that without even trying. Her father wanted, with the Mad King, wanted to destroy the city and burn it down, and she basically fulfilled those wishes 20 years later, or however long it is, 25 years later. And so it's just kind of, it is interesting. You saw that part of the character slowly building, but it was still just kind of like, it was gut wrenching, because you're watching the show. There's this gradual build up and character development, and then it really starts to pick up in like season 4 to 6, and then it's like, oh shit, Night King, this stuff's happening. How do we, what are we gonna do? Season 7, like, let's united together to fight the ice fuckers and all this shit. And you're really building, and as at the end, they're like, oh, they're here, they're at Winterfell, it's time, like they're here, this is it. And then the start of it is like, all right, here we go, the battle that we've all been waiting for years. Not me literally, but whatever. And it happens, and then they win, obviously, and everybody's like joyous and in celebration, and everybody's happy, and things are looking good for everyone for a second, and then from there you're on like a fucking high for the show, and then it just plummets. Not for, I mean, it happens kind of gradually. Like first it's like, okay, let's move the troops south, and we're gonna take it from the queen, and she's crazy, and we're gonna beat her. Cool, good. I don't like her anyways. And it's like, okay, she's fine with the dragons. And then all of a sudden, one of her dragons gets shot out of the sky and killed within seconds. And you're like, oh shit. And then not only that, their fleet gets destroyed again. And then they kidnap her friend and her advisor, and then they decapitate her. And that was like the first thing of like, oh, this is not like, it just slowly was like, uh-oh, shit's getting bad, and they breach the gates, and it's like, oh, okay, so this might be it, and they'll win. And they throw down their arms, they surrender, the city surrenders, and then she just flips a switch and just decides to destroy everything. And it's like, the longer it goes, the more depressed you get, because you're just like, why are you doing this? Stop, like, please. And at least that's how I felt. So it was like, by the end of it, between it all, it was like, am I depressed right now? Like, what the fuck? Like, I was just like so happy and giddy and excited to watch the show, and in this episode alone, it just took all of that away. And so it was very like, you get like slapped in the face with it a little bit, and you're like, oh,